Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into a Purpose-Driven Wife podcast. I'm your host, Trista LeBon, and today I have with me Elizabeth from The Reluctant Landlord. Now, today, guys, I'm very much excited about just learning how to navigate the world of real estate, okay? Honestly, real estate to me is a little bit scary. And learning from Elizabeth and her blog, The Reluctant Landlord, she has tons and tons of awesome information, you guys, that you need to check out. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about that, okay? So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to learning more about real estate. So, Elizabeth, before we get started in today's episode, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of, I guess, just kind of lead us into how you got into real estate?
So my name is Elizabeth Colgrove. I am married to an awesome military man, which I'm sure most of us are.
Yeah.
Got married at 22 and 23, right out of my undergrad program. And I think like most people, when you go to college, you want to get a job. Well, my first introduction to the military life was a small town in Texas. Well, first it was Corpus, which was larger, and then it was Kingsville. And it was hard to find work, so I went back and got my master's, and I just decided that I really wanted something portable. And I have always loved real estate. I mean, my mom has stories of me being 10 and looking at MLS listings when my parents were buying a house and not focusing on my math. It's just something I've always loved. And so my parents had a rental, and they were very do-it-yourselfers for both their house and their one rental. And so I kind of always grew up with that concept. And so when we moved to our first duty station that my husband was comfortable, like trying out the idea of buying a house, we bought it with a VA loan, and it was a foreclosure in 2011. And then we gutted it. We did it together, and we loved it. Well, it had its moments, don't get me wrong.
Right.
We loved it. So we moved. So I got a job, and I just happened to get lucky that the closer of the two job offers that I had was real estate instead of manufacturing, which is what my undergrad was in and what my master's was in. And like all of that focus had previously been in manufacturing, but it was an hour and a half drive. And I just wanted a family life after doing that in Texas. So I took the 45-minute job as an executive assistant in a real estate and corporate company. And it just took off. It had its moments, but I learned contracts, and I learned accounting, and I learned from the best. And then they remembered I had a master's degree in MBA, and then I got moved to the business department. And so I kind of got to learn. And so we decided that we would invest my salary because we knew that my salary wouldn't last. And after coming from Texas, where I made $12 an hour, and now I was making $50,000 an hour, but we knew that it would only last as long as his current duty station.
Yeah.
So we wanted to invest it. And so this was 2012, and we went up with friends, and we're looking in Charleston, and fell in love with these houses. And me being a background in financial analyst, I knew that the area was coming and that the issues were psychological because it already recovered, just not mentally, because the investors were still taking hits, even though the areas were renting and they were great. So I convinced my husband to invest $20,000 into this area from my salary, and we bought two houses. And then we got last-minute orders to California. So, that's when we decided to rent out our other house. And so now we had 3 rentals. And so it's just kind of built off of that. Those were our first 3, and we had originally planned on having a property manager, and the costs were outrageous. So I was like, well, I'll try it. Worst case, we'll hire one.
Yeah.
And you just can't fail. I mean, when you guys get last minute orders and you weren't planning on it and just use the last of your savings to buy, your 3rd house, and then are buying your 4th house because you need a place to live, like you just suddenly cannot lose. And so that is kind of what, real estate for us was born on. It's like, we will not fail. We will figure this out. And we did. So that's kind of where Reluctant Landlord came from, was I got tired of hearing at these cocktail parties about how real estate was awful. And to be brutally honest, being unemployed for 13 months and not being able to find work. And then when I did find work, it was again in manufacturing for pretty much what I made, 3 years ago into my career at a county 45 minutes away. And it was kind of like my real estate saved us.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to start talking, because yes, real estate can be horrible and we all know the horror stories. The people that are successful, you don't tend to hear about them as much. Like, I've met them, but they don't see any reason to challenge people.
I really love that you're saying that, because all I hear is the negative side of real estate. And I do hear, people that are successful, but they're not really sharing, like, the hard things that they had to go through to get to where they at, And so what I wanted to ask you is, so your husband was also interested in real estate in the beginning of your marriage? I mean, I guess you were saying that your mom, kind of inspired you. So what about your husband?
So we have the story that the first rental, he played Angry Birds through the entire thing. Like, the deal was he would come to walk through and look at it. His definition of coming was playing Angry Birds, because his deal afterwards was he got to go to his favorite restaurant in Charleston. I actually wrote a whole post on it. It's like how to get your reluctant spouses on board is the summary.
Nice.
The thing is, my husband was always supportive of me, just like I was always supportive of the boat he was building in my garage, even though I had no desire to build the boat and he has no desire to play in my real estate.
Right.
So I think, to be honest, no, my husband had no desire to do it in the beginning. Now he loves what it's done for us. Like, if you check out my October income report,
I've seen it.
Yeah. Make, like, on a month average where we have no expenses, we make $1,800 a month, which isn't a lot of money, but it's something solid. And all it came from was, investing my income, but mostly it came from buying a house whenever we could as a personal property, putting as little down into it, and then renting it out when we left. And every house was bought as an investment. And the one thing that if you do get people to talk about who are successful, they will tell you they buy it as an investment. It's the same thing as stock to them. Like, yes, you bring your child home from the hospital with it. Yes, you raise your kids. Yes, you watch your kittens dash across it and you sit in front of the fireplace and do podcasts. But when you move out of it, it's an asset. It's a business. It's going to either make it or break you. And that's what you have to look at.
So when you do start to, so when, I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying you in general, like, if you as a person decide to buy a house, is it automatically like you're in debt, or is it like an investment in a way that is going to help you in the long run make money? If you understand my question.
I do. And the question it comes back to is you, the person.
Yeah.
Husband and I do not buy a house that we know that we can't rent out instantly for more than our mortgage. Like, right now we are up for orders, and everybody knows how it goes. We have verbals to one area, but if my husband gets a class, we're going to another. And of course, one's in Washington State and the other's in Maryland. So right next to each other.
Yeah.
But this isn't 2012 in the real estate world. The markets have bounced back. And so we're really looking at every house. And my husband has told me, no, like, okay, reevaluate. Because you have to look for a house that today it will rent for more than your mortgage. Because when I went through, and when I was unemployed, I went through the area that we bought now that got hit, Hanford, California. And they got decimated and people lost everything. And if you talk to like our superiors who were our age and bought out here during 06 and 07, who lost it, none of them bought with the exit plan of renting. It was always, it will appreciate, because if I rented it right now for the going rent, I'm going to lose $600 or $700 a month. Like, it's not going to do that. So we have always gone in that if we can rent out our house, we will be safe. So to answer your question, if our attitude has been, if we can rent it, then we're protected. So then it's an asset. The minute that we buy a house that will rent for less than our mortgage from day one, that's when the issue will become.
Okay. So for someone that's in the military, as yourself, do you think it makes sense to buy a house?
It makes sense to buy a house if you can treat it as a business and an asset.
Okay.
If you want to pick out the perfect house that'll fit your family and that with no future exit plan, then you should rent.
Yeah. But, the exit plan, so your exit plan is for every house it seems like you get is to rent it.
Mm-hmm. That's our exit plan. That's always been our exit plan.
So did you kind of fall into that out of mistakes, or was this like since day one, we're going to get this house and we're going to rent it?
Actually, day one, our first house, we totally fixed it up. We bought a foreclosure. We put lots of sweat equity into it, and our tenants tried to buy it 2 weeks after they signed their lease. Very first house.
Wow.
So we sat down and we're like, okay, we've always said that we will look and see at what makes more money, the profit we'd make from it or the cash flow and all of the stuff that comes with it being a rental, along with the headache. I mean, the one thing you'll find on Reluctant Landlord is I am transparent. And let me tell you, it has had some moments.
Yeah.
The thing, though, that you have to remember is for every moment, there's been a positive or it wouldn't still be here. And I say that in the most positive way. So to answer your question, we decided that the $30,000 that we would have gotten from the house just didn't make up the $300 to now $400 that we get from the cash flow every month. Plus the fact that our tenants pay down $400 a month off our principal, which means you're really making about $800 off the house. And when you also looked at like the tax benefits and the fact that the area is appreciated, and so now we have another $60,000, and the house we totally gutted, so it's had like maybe $1,000 in work for the last 2 years because we already put the work in it ourselves. So for us, financially, it made sense to keep it, although we did have that conversation. So no, we intentionally have picked to be renters, and we've even had opportunities to get out.
So when you decide to get a house, right, or get like a fixer-upper foreclosure, what are some sweat equity that should be put into the house?
Really depends on the houses. So in the beginning, we did a foreclosure. They're fixer-uppers, right? Painting, carpet, refinishing the kitchen cabinets a different color and painting over them because for whatever reason they were beat up, cleaning up, putting landscaping in, that type of stuff. But we also found a different kind called short sales. Short sales is when people want to sell their house, but they can't because it's worth less than what they've paid for it. So that's when they go to the bank and they ask for them to short, i.e. like forgive the difference. Well, like a 6 to 8 month process. It's not quick. I think our shortest was 52 days and our longest was 9 months. So, and most of them were 9 months and only one was 52 days. So for us, we found that was the best method. Lots of paperwork, a little bit more stress, but then we got a perfect house in perfect condition because there were like 2005 houses. So for us, it was really going into the area and being like, what makes sense? Like, here's our criteria. Here's our budget. We want the worst house in the best neighborhood with the best schools because that's what's going to rent. What can we find? So really going into each situation impartially. And, to go back to your previous question is like, should you rent or should you buy and should military do it? Like, I honestly believe that if you can treat this as a business, everybody should buy a house because it truly can be a great asset. But I'll never forget, we had dear friends a long time ago when they were looking, they found this beautiful brand new house. It was at the top of their budget. And I mean, top of the budget. It would have needed to rent for like $2,000 in an area where most people don't want to exceed $1,700. And it was in the worst school district. And of course they asked my opinion. And I'm like, do I give you my honest opinion or do
Yeah.
I tell you what you want to hear? So I was like, that is not an investment. You know, you're not going to appeal to families who this budget is appealing to. The house isn't going to work for the school district. You're going to have a trouble. So a couple days later, they thank me for my information and they go and they buy this great $100,000 cheaper house, much smaller, great school district, great little starter home. Couple years later, they get orders and it rents in a week. Yeah. So that's where it really comes to for military is, are you going to buy or are you going to rent? And it's kind of those two different stories. If you want that big house, rent it. That's perfect. Yeah. If you want that other house that will make a great investment and you're willing to be a landlord, and when you put your house up for rent, have the person come peer in your windows because they want to see what it looks like then be a landlord. But there's lots of stories, and that's kind of like to differentiate the two.
So how much should someone save to start a business like this?
We started on almost at nothing. So our first 2 years of marriage, when I was going through grad school, we were able to pretty much put me through with cash with a little bit left over from both of our undergrad programs that we didn't use from the parents. So we were able to save up about $17,000 because we had roommates and we just lived really, really frugally those first 2 years. So when we got to Virginia Beach, we had about $17,000 in our savings account and about $3,000 in more viable our checking account. Mm-hmm. And we bought a foreclosure with the VA loan. We put, I think, $1,000 in when you added in all the inspections and all of that stuff. Yeah. $2,000 when you add in like the travel back and forth from Texas because I wanted to see the house. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Mm-hmm. And then we just used our paychecks. We had that $17,000 that we could use as a fallback, but I got a part-time job with Military One Source as a consultant. Mm-hmm. And then I got my full-time job with the real estate company. I worked both. No family life for about 10 weeks, but we made great money and we just funded the house that way. And so we did it on zero. So we did have that little bit of protection, but we did it literally through funding through our checking or through our salaries. And then that $17,000 bought our first investment 6 months later.
Wow. So you guys were living frugally then.
That has been our key. We've lived off one salary, and while we both have like a one or two expensive habits, we tone everything else down so that we can live off one salary and save the others to invest because that's important to us. You asked me why we did rentals. Yeah. Our long-term goal is early retirement when my husband can retire from the Navy. God and Navy willing, of course, but that's our goal. So the goal is the passive income from the houses.
So why do you have such a passion about this? You know, is it from, all of the experience that you had in buying a house and just all of that experience and the PCS thing and things like that?
For military, being able to find a new home is almost like, finding a new grocery store. Like we have to figure out how to find housing in new locations. You don't do this just once in 20 years. We do this once every 1 to 3 to 5 years, depending on what the current world is. Yeah. So for me, I got tired of seeing my fellow people, like fellow wives that took care of me. And the first one will tell you that I am an absolute basket case at sometimes. I cannot cook. And some days I wonder if I will make it to point A, point B. And so when people take you under your wing and they make sure you survive, when you have something to give back and something that you're great at, you want to make them succeed. I mean, that's what this community is all about.
It's true.
And so I will never forget, like early in our career, one of my husband's superiors chewed him out over buying a house. I have sat through many awkward drives where people have told me how they've lost their shirt. And I realized that I could keep my mouth shut because my husband was like, I really didn't want to tell him that we owned 4. or speak up and we could help people be successful. Like right before our conversation tonight, you know, good friends of ours were buying their first house, and you know, I was sharing them my tricks, and then they were trying to put together this letter that I recommend to help, you know, sell yourself. And I just typed it up for them and sent it over and said, here's something of what I would do based on these questions I asked about, like what your hobbies are, and, you know, feel free to do what you want. And they're like, oh, I couldn't believe. And I'm like, my pleasure. But yet they're the same person that came over and drank with me after I wanted to kill my contractor a long time ago, you know?
Yes.
So it's this world, and I feel like this is something that I am good at, and I can keep my mouth shut and maybe have more tenants because I'm teaching people how to be successful. But you know what? These are the people that take care of me. These are the people that got me through my first deployment. Whether you know me or you don't know me, like we've all gotten through this together, and that's what this community is about. So my talent is understanding real estate, and over the grace of experiences and what God's assets have given to me, I understand this world, and I want to help other people be successful, because this shouldn't be a financial noose around your throat. This should be an asset that helps you and your family become even more stable and have even more financial success because you're part of the military.
Amen. That's so true. I love that you said in your blog that, you know, the success in this real estate business is baby steps, basically. It's not like, from what I'm getting, it's not like you buy the house, you put a little bit of sweat equity in it, and then you start making money.
No, not at all.
Okay. So how can someone start to, okay, well, you know, they did everything. And so when should they start expecting the money but navigate through the real estate business?
You have to put any of your own income into the rental this month to pay the bill. No success. Woohoo! You just do it this month. I mean, it's as basic as that.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, like our first house, we made like $300 off of it. Our second house, we made like $200. And, you know, the day the dishwasher went, we made like negative $10.
Yeah.
But the idea was that money on the good months went into a savings account that we never touched. And on the bad months, that's where it came out. And then over time, you know, you get to your next duty station, you're smart, you buy a smart house. Okay, now that's another $300. And you know what? 4 houses later, that was $1,200. And then 5 houses later, that was a few more. And so even if your goal is only 1 or 2, that could be $300 or $600 a month. I mean, we all talk about bringing in just a little bit more for our family.
Yeah.
But you could totally keep your house. And, you know, we learned, I had no intentions after watching my mom self-manage as a stay-at-home mom for years. I was like, I am not a property manager, and I am not doing this. Yeah. And then my first job taught me how to read a contract. So I was reading my property management contract in Charleston, South Carolina, and I remember throwing it across my desk, the floor, going, I cannot believe what they put in here. And I had that conversation with the guy, and he said, oh, well, we can negotiate it. And the moment I had to negotiate so that I felt like I was getting a fair deal, I was like, you know what? How badly can I screw this up? Which I probably shouldn't have taunted the world like that, but I did. So you figure it out, and, you know, you just keep going. And it's not going to be the way you intended, but you just, every single day you wake up, you handle an issue, and when you go to bed that night, you're like, I did my best. And that adds up. Baby step after baby step. Before you know it, the market's recovered. So now you're seeing appreciation again. And then your house, the rent's gone up because your house is worth more. And so people have higher mortgages, which means they have to have higher rent. And just those baby steps, because your house is going to become more expensive. Like your taxes might, your insurance might, but your house won't. And so over time, that profit margin gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you've paid off more and more of this house. And if you think of it, that at 20 years for most of our husbands, a minimum to retire, or us, and then a 30-year loan, I mean, you could have that house paid 2/3 off if you bought it at the beginning, 1/3 if you bought it in the middle, depending on what kind of loan you are. So the object of this is baby steps, and it's a marathon. You just want to keep up with it. And before you know it, those are the people who are thankful that they have it. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, and you got to survive the negative moments.
So it teaches you how to persevere then.
Yes, and you learn how not to be a redhead in my case.
Okay. So how do you manage the loans? Because, and then on top of that, you talk about being mortgage free. How do you manage that?
So when I talk about being mortgage free, it's more of like a financial joke, sort of. We have $1.3 million of debt, but our rentals cover our entire mortgage so our 6 houses on that income sheet covers our 7th house that we live in now and all of our utilities. So if we're only putting in the amount of money that we did, which would never have bought a house all by itself, we basically live mortgage free. So like if I wasn't working, I could cover all of our house expenses by my rentals. Okay. And so that's what I was talking about, being mortgage free. Okay.
And then, with the loans, it's the I guess the rent is covering that.
Mm-hmm. So you can count up to whatever's on your taxes, right? Yes. To cover your mortgage. So usually that equates to about 75% of your rent. And so we've always strove for $250 to $300 a month. Mm-hmm. So that's always worked out to about that 75% number. Mm-hmm. So basically our houses cover themselves in debt. So as long as we personally keep ourselves clean financially, then we can requalify for another house.
Wow. Because you said you are 1.3 million in loans?
Yes. Last I checked.
Wow. You should write a blog post about that.
Once we buy if my husband gets the location that we're looking at a house, it'll be about 1.6. And I figured that would be a fun little blog post to write about.
Nice. But, oh, wow. So, but the way that you are going into these houses, it's covering the loans, right?
Oh, yeah. We have never had to out of pocket cover our houses. Yes, we've totally dropped $4,000 in a 36-hour period, and there's a blog article about it. But we had lots of fruitful months that it covered this desert month, if that makes any sense. So, the key is, yes, these houses could cover, our expenses, but in reality, it all just goes into an account. And so when we have issues, we use that money, and then we want to go to buy another house because we moved, or we want to upgrade, or whatever the reason is, then we use that money from there too. So that's kind of our house buying account. And then we just pay for our own frugal living off of my husband's salary. And the other thing to keep in mind is, I'm talking about building an empire. I'm talking about early retirement. Please don't let this overwhelm you. If your goal is just 1 or 2 houses, the same philosophies work. We got started because it was cheaper. The whole reason my husband agreed to even try out his crazy 23-year-old wife's idea was because it was cheaper to buy a house than to rent it. And he could see the numbers. And slowly over time, that's still been true. When we bought in California, our mortgage was $950, and to rent out the same house, it was $1,400. Eventually, you will see me as a renter. Probably not a happy renter, but I will still become a renter, because when it financially doesn't make sense to buy a house, we won't. And then we'll rent. So that's the thing to keep in mind is if it makes sense, then you might want to think about it. Part of the reason our current base is Hanford made sense was because everyone refused to buy, because it was that crappy base that no one wanted to go to, and were counting down their 3-year tour. And then 2 years into, fell in love with, because it's small town living. I walked home from my professional job the other day because my husband and I were sharing one car. keep your mind open, even if it's not your first choice, and then really evaluate what makes sense financially for your family. If you're looking at houses and they're significantly higher to buy than rent, or to rent than buy,
Yeah.
then maybe it makes sense to buy your first house. If you're going to buy and you can't find anything, but there's a rental that's significantly under, then maybe that makes sense. The idea is to use the houses as an asset. It's supposed to help your family. So, like, if you look at case study number 4 on my website, you'll see that we saved way more than we put into the houses, even with a bathroom going and a new AC unit going, because we made over $600 on our BAH a month. And so that allowed us to save over $7,000. So if I remember correctly, over $20,000 over the lifetime of a 3-year tour. So again, it's not going to make sense everywhere. It's not going to make sense every year, but keep your mind open. And then when it does make sense, buying that house, and then when you leave, maybe you can get a $30,000 to $50,000 profit. But if you're getting $500 or $600 a month, which is, $500, that's $6,000 a year. Maybe worth hanging on to that house, because that's now a preschool payment. You put your $6,000 in the emergency fund, and now when you can pay for one of your kids' preschools or some of those extracurricular activities that we're all trying to do. So that's how just 1 or 2 houses can really make a difference financially without ever really putting you out for a down payment or having to put a lot of money into starters, because we all know how hard that is.
Yes. So, okay, now I guess for you it may be like basic questions, but for those that are trying to buy a house, what are like the first 3 things that they should do?
Find a great realtor or a great mortgage broker, your choice, and then ask them who their favorite other person is. So what we have done and makes us super successful, which is why I like the checklist sheet is so easy, is that people find a trusted person, either mortgage broker or realtor, and then you trust them. Like, you grill them, you find that perfect person that you're like, she is who I want to go to battle with me, because there's going to be moments, it's like a battle.
Yeah.
And that's who you trust. And then you follow their lead. You ask them what mortgage broker they recommend, and you go with them. Like, we are guilty of not always shopping around to the best and cheapest broker, but our loans always go through. We never are homeless. So that's how we do it. And then from there, we follow their lead. They hook us up with a great inspector, and they hook us up with all of the stuff. And they tell us when it was a bad idea and when we should maybe reevaluate, because the roof looks like it might have like 12 months left on it. That's the simplest answer that I can give you. Because, I know you said basic questions, that this might not be basic to me. Well, my background when we first got started was I had an undergrad in finance, a minor in accounting, and then I just finished my MBA. And I remember coming out of the bank meeting and never having my head hurt so badly after that meeting, and being so confused over what they could possibly want from me. Because it's a different language. Like, even to someone that spent her entire career understanding this world, it hurt my head.
Yeah.
So that is why you need those people on your side. We just closed our 8th mortgage, and my husband missed number 7 and 6 because he was deployed. But he didn't miss the frantic phone calls while he was in court calls saying, you have to sign this, and then getting frustrated. Well, this time we spent 2 days trying to prove that we donated $1,800 over 2 months to a local rescue. And this is small town America. So a lot of the stuff isn't quite as documented as it is out of DC. This is where I grew up. And my husband was like, I can't believe that you've lost 2 days of your life doing this. I'm like, oh, honey, you should have seen last year. So it's just going into this with an open mind. And when they ask you to sign stuff, know that you're going to sign stuff. When they ask you to jump, You ask how high. You don't fight them because remember, they're on your side. They want this to close as much as you do.
Yeah.
So that's the two basic tricks. If you have a great realtor who finds you a great mortgage broker or a great mortgage broker who will find you a great realtor, it doesn't matter how much a novice you are, you will do amazing.
Wow. And then, okay, so I find a really good realtor, and then I do what they advise. And then, so what's the next step after that?
Then you're going to have a broker who's going to help you get pre-qual. So they're going to tell you how much money you're qualified for. Our first house, we were qualified for $400,000, and we bought a $230,000 house.
Okay.
So just because you're qualified for X, Y, and Z amount, figure out what monthly payment you are comfortable with. And what we always do is like, what would we rent? And then we look and say, or what are we interested in living in? And we look at what that budget is. And then we're like, oh, that's our budget. So then from there, so we're like, okay, we're comfortable with $1,400 a month as our mortgage payment. And we go to our mortgage broker and she's like, that's $330,000 out here. Or that's $160,000 or whatever that number correlates. And then that's how we go further. Now, we tend to look at our BAH, try to cut about $300 off of it and say, okay, now that's what we're going to look at buying our next house. And then that's how we go and find our budget. Because our goal is to live on my husband's salary as cheap as possible so that we have more investing money and to put into other items.
Wow. And then, okay, so we found the broker that tell us how much money we'll qualify for. And then what happens after that?
You go and you find a house. So you tell your realtor what you're looking for. So the first thing is keep it real simple. I think we've added a fourth must-have in the last couple of months, but typically we require a 2-car garage because my husband's likes to work with wood. So that's a must-have. It has to be within 30 minutes of base, and then it has to be within our budget. We tend to require a 3-bed, 2-bath, just because that's what you need at least for a minimum for re-rentability. And then that's it. And so then we go and we look at houses. My husband and I are pretty handy. He's the handy one with the tools, and I can paint some days. Has my moment.
Yes. Wow.
I might not have had a great day, but give me a paintbrush, we'll do just fine. So we look for the ugly houses, We look for the great roofs, great windows, new siding, and then it looks like it needs a little help inside. And so we'll go and we'll paint, we'll put new carpet. We'll do stuff over time. So like the cheap improvements, like if we can get carpet reasonably and the paint we'll do right before we move in. So maybe like a $3,000 budget. And then everything else we just do over time. Like every time my husband went on a TDY when we were first starting out, I would do a project like paint all the wood molding white. And then over time, and like when he went to Sear, I painted all the kitchen cabinets. $100 to paint them, 2 weeks of my life to do them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Houses that needed those work, and that saved us $50,000 because we were able to buy this foreclosure that was beat up, and then we just did these little projects. So for us, it was that. Whereas we have friends that it's like brand new, and so you're paying that premium price because it's brand new. So it's figuring out what works best for you guys. And honestly, we found that just by looking at houses. The first time I looked at 30. After that, there was usually like 3 I got to choose from because it fit our budget.
Wow. Okay. So then you find a house, right? That's within budget. And then by budget, that means how much I'm willing to pay a month, right? The mortgage.
Yes.
So that's the budget. Right. Okay. And then after that, I sign a house. Okay. And then we live in it, right?
And then you live in it. Then you close the house and then you live in it. And then when you're updating it and you're increasing it, you keep an eye on what your competition is also doing. So when you're going through and finding your dream house, also keep an eye on what everybody else is doing. Because the last thing you want to do is over update it. So if no one else has granite, adding granite countertops might make it go that pop feature, but may probably not give you more money. So you really want to look for what competition is doing and keep that in mind. Like, honestly, in the last couple of years, we haven't done any work to our houses because we bought them at short sales. They were in great condition. Sure, we could have put granite and some of the other stuff, but my house rented for the same price that people who did that rented for, and I saved my $10,000 for something else. So keep in mind that you're not over improving it. And then when you go to rent it out, now look at what you can rent it for and then price it realistically or sell it realistically, because just because you put $30,000 in the bathroom, you're not going to get that back. So that's why it's important when you're living in there that you're being mindful of what you can truly get for that on resale.
Hello everyone, so we are going to stop here. This is just part 1 to the business side of house buying. And I really loved the conversation that I had with Elizabeth. She shared some really rich tips, some basic tips in how to be successful in the business of house buying. So tune in next Monday for part 2 to the conversation that we had and on the business, on this being successful in the business of house buying. Guys, thank you so much. Please go to A Purpose Driven Wife at adrivenwife.com for more information about the information that Elizabeth and I talked about during this episode, and for more information as well on Elizabeth's blog, and her website will also be on the show notes as well on the website. Thank you so much, guys. And if you would like more information about the episodes that I put out, or more of the episodes and things like that, tune in on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, and also on my website if you are interested in learning more. Thank you so much, guys, and you guys be blessed. Bye.